Is everybody here?
Yeah.
We need to check in with the staff before we do anything.
Hey, can we do a quick audio and visual check?
Yes, ma'am.
We're just waiting on the ranking member and then we can begin.
Okay, thank you. The subcommittee will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that the chair be authorized to declare a recess at any time during today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. I also ask unanimous consent that members not on the subcommittee be permitted to sit with the subcommittee at today's hearing and ask questions. Without objection, so ordered. As a reminder, please keep your microphone muted unless speaking. And should I hear any inadvertent background noise, I'll request that the member please mute their microphone. To insert a document into the record, please have your staff email it to documentsti@mail.house.gov. This morning, I'd like to welcome our special guests and witnesses. We have the Honorable Robin Carnahan, who is the administrator of the GSA, and we have Ms. Nina Albert, who is the Commissioner for Public Building Services of the GSA. We look forward to hearing their testimony. You know, the GSA provides workspace for so many people who have been impacted by the pandemic and beyond that we're anxious to hear their testimony. In fact, it's 1.2 million federal employees across more than 50 federal agencies and over 1,500 federal buildings. Approximately 53% of the public buildings portfolio is over 50 years old, and 28% of it is over 75 years old. GSA leases about approximately 8,100 office buildings, courthouses, land, ports of entry, data processing centers, laboratories, and specialized spaces all across the country for our federal agencies' use and occupation. During the period from fiscal year 2019 through 2023, 60% of those leases will expire. The portfolio is projected to include 183.4 million square feet of owned space and 183.5 million square feet of lease space in FY 2021. With that kind of portfolio, you can see why we are interested in how the agency's doing, what it projects its needs will be, and what some of the problems are that we can help them to address. We also know that 25 leases are expiring between January 2022 and December 2025. And so with the new working conditions and post-COVID, we'd like to know what the plans are for those leases because we haven't seen any information about what's going to happen with them. In the past, this committee has addressed a number of issues that I hope our witnesses will at least provide some information today and then perhaps can bring back other information. But these are issues that have been important to me and to the other members of the committee. And if I could just list them briefly, you can see what our challenges are. We're always concerned about taxpayer dollars and that they're being used most efficiently and most effectively. So we need information on the lease versus build alternatives, as well as deferred maintenance for the buildings that we already have. We would want to know what the plans are now that employment has shifted to so many people working at home and a need for less space. How do we need to rethink our inventory? Also, as we build buildings, we have several things that we want to consider. One is how to make them sustainable, how to make them healthy, how to make them perhaps fit some of the LEED standards so we know that they're energy efficient. We can't just build back better. We have to include resiliency considerations in the buildings that we construct in the future. Other issues related to that construction include making them bird friendly. Some of our buildings have reflecting glass that cause birds to crash into them. We want to see how we can address that. Also, parking and access to other modes of transportation that are available as we locate some of these buildings. And in addition to that, the design of the buildings themselves. We have been fighting an old executive order from the last administration that wanted all the buildings to look like the Parthenon. Well, this is not the federal design code. This is not the way they should be. They should fit with the geography. They should fit with the culture, and they should take into account input from local artistic community. We also want to talk about what happened with the hotel, the old post office that was leased by Donald Trump in the last administration. Now, I don't plan to relitigate everything that happened before. We want to move forward, but we do want to know how some of those things happen and how we can prevent making the same mistakes going forward. So that's kind of the agenda that we have. We're anxious to hear what your plans are and how we can be helpful. And I'll now turn it over to our ranking member, Mr. Webster, for a comment.
Thank you, Chair Titus, and thank you for the two you've invited today, the administrator and the commissioner. Prior to COVID-19, we made significant progress on right-sizing federal office space through the reduction and consolidations of space approved by the committee in GSA's prospectus process, we saved taxpayers over $4 billion. Following COVID, we are facing new opportunities given the shift in workspace needs due to increased remote work, as well as indications that teleworking may continue at higher levels post-pandemic. But right sizing the federal real estate portfolio is not the only thing about shrinking space. It's about ensuring that there is a reduction in cost and that agencies have the right place and that they get rid of unneeded properties as quickly as possible. The goal, for example, for the Federal Assets Sale and Transfer Act is not just to simply streamline the disposal process, but to get agencies to look more strategically at their assets. This helps produce financially sound and operationally efficient results from sales, redevelopments, outleases, and other activities. To achieve significant changes, as we saw during the freeze and reduce the footprint efforts, it takes the administration, including GSA and OMB, working together with Congress to spur agencies to make better decisions about their space. It also means alternative financing options should be on the table. It makes no sense for taxpayers to effectively and pay for a building sometimes many times over through the lease and then have to pay fair market price on the value on top of that just to purchase it. Although the GSA has the legal authorities to negotiate discounted purchases options, enter into public-private partnerships, it has not been able to take advantage of those authorities. GSA should be free to use these authorities where appropriate to facilitate the right sizing of the portfolio and reduce the cost to the taxpayer. I hope we can work together to ensure that we achieve that, and I look forward to hearing from our witness today. Thank you, Chair Titus, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I now recognize Chairman of the T&I Full Committee, Mr. DeFazio.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for holding this hearing. Administrator Carnahan, Commissioner Albert, welcome to the committee. We want to be a good partner with GSA. So far in fiscal year 22, you asked for 32 repair, alteration, construction projects. That's the last week. We've authorized 25. The Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act has $3.4 billion for land ports of entry, which need a tremendous amount of work. And the Build Back Better Act includes $500 million to help make federal buildings more energy efficient. And then outside of our jurisdiction, of course, although it was part of the Invest Act in the last Congress, is the purchase of zero emission vehicles for the Postal Service, which will be a tremendous boost to the EV industry and also tremendously reduce pollution. I'm looking forward to that acquisition. I really want to work with GSA to make it easier. I would agree with a number of things the ranking member just said. In particular, I've heard about how frustrating it is you can't access. I understand now there's $10 billion of rent that you're collecting. Now, like a good landlord, you put aside funds and then you use that to make repairs or new acquisitions. Unfortunately, Congress has not allowed you full access or easy access to those funds. And I hope that's something that we can find a way to correct in the future, and would look forward to working with you and your staff on ways to figure out how to do that, and have you make the case that if you had access to those funds, how you could actually save money in the end because of not deferring maintenance to the point where buildings are basically on the verge of demolition and other issues with deferred maintenance. But I've got to say that I think your agency is a little bit Congress shy, should I say. Our requests for technical assistance take too long. We're not getting answers about questions about your post-COVID space requirements. And that makes it difficult for us to help you. You've got to help us work on that culture. I'm hoping for transformational changes under your leadership, so that we can address some of these issues. Should you own more space than you can afford to maintain? What does it mean if Congress allocates less money than you request every year? What about the rent structure? How many courthouses do the federal judiciary really need? And how big do those things need to be? The robing area for the judges in the new federal courthouse in Eugene, where my office is housed, their robing areas are bigger than my office. There's real questions and scrutiny that needs to be applied. I realize they are a third and independent branch, but that doesn't mean they have to have excess space. And to put it mildly, your predecessor was challenging to work with. I won't even, I won't go beyond that. I'll just leave it there. But we still don't have answers about GSA's failure to properly consider the emoluments clause of the U.S. Constitution when it came to the old post office building. It was pretty darn clear when I read it. We never, ever got clear answers to how that was actually constitutional. And no clarity at all about the very sudden decision to cancel the decade-long effort to get the FBI a new and secure headquarters, outside of downtown Washington, D.C. That was a very long effort, very, very suspiciously and abruptly canceled. We still don't have good answers to that. We would like answers to that. So I'm looking for new transparency under your leadership, and I look forward to your testimony today and working with you in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. DeFazio. I don't think Mr. Graves is here, so we'll move on with our witnesses. I want to welcome you both and thank you, Ms. Carnahan, for talking to me on the phone before we had this hearing. I feel like we have started off on a better foot than with your predecessor, and I appreciate that. So our witnesses for the record are the Honorable Robin Carnahan, Administrator of General Services Administration, and Ms. Nina Albert, Commissioner, Public Building Service, General Services Administration. Thank you both for being here. Without objection, our witnesses' full statement will be included in the record. Since your written testimony will be made part of the record, the committee requests that you limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. We can now proceed with that testimony. Administrator Carnahan, you're up.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman Titus, Ranking Member Webster, Chairman DeFazio, and members of the subcommittee. It's a great honor to be with you here today. I'm pleased to be here as GSA Administrator and on behalf of our employees talk about our mission, which I think has never been more important. Now, I know this committee has been very interested in GSA's efforts to keep our buildings safe and operational throughout the pandemic. So I want to start by thanking everyone on the committee for your support, but also acknowledging the tireless work of the GSA team to respond to the pandemic. I can tell you that the work of the Public Building Service, as well as our Federal Acquisition Service, has been heroic over the past 2 years. They've acquired and distributed huge amounts of supplies, amended thousands of service contracts to ensure more cleaning, helped many federal, state, and local partners meet their emergency needs. My written testimony goes into more details, and Commissioner Albert and I would be happy to discuss any of this important work later today. Like me, I know the committee is very interested in what comes next. So I appreciate the chance to be here to talk to you and outline what I see as the biggest priorities and opportunities for GSA in the months ahead. First, I want to acknowledge that President Truman's original purpose for creating GSA in the first place remains our North Star. And that's to streamline government so it works better for the people we serve and to save money doing it. That mission hasn't changed, but especially coming out of the pandemic, in which all of us have had to adapt to new ways of working, The way GSA delivers on that mission certainly has and will continue to change. In our real estate portfolio, that means finding ways to both right size in light of our partners' changing needs and rebalance our portfolio so that we can consolidate whenever possible into owned government buildings that offer customers the type of workspaces they need going forward. A number of those kind of new offerings are already in progress, like an office in a box concept, and also pilot projects that will allow agency staff to access federal and private co-working spaces that can offer both shorter commuting times and secure work environments. In government-wide acquisition, this means becoming the marketplace of choice for our partners by making it so easy and so fast and so cost-effective to buy through GSA that it just wouldn't make sense for agencies to look anywhere else. We know that in order to create that kind of marketplace is going to require us to make it easier, faster, and cheaper for businesses, especially small businesses from underserved communities, to access and sell to government buyers. And when it comes to technology, it means making smart bets on creating a suite of shared, secure services that all agencies at every level of government can access to improve the way they deliver services to the public and save money. We all witnessed how outdated and hard to use government technology through the pandemic took a toll on so many families across the country. And we know that when we make government websites work better for people at their time of need, it isn't just about a website. It's about showing that our government can and does work effectively for the people it serves. Of course, to accomplish all of this, we need Congress's support and partnership. And that's why the president's budget request, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the reconciliation package is so important. Those are funds that will allow us to repair and upgrade public assets, providing an historic opportunity to consolidate agencies from this costly leased space into federally owned space, make our buildings safe, sustainable, and resilient to future emergencies, and create adaptive, flexible space that's better suited for the workforce of the future. All this also includes, as the chairman said, modernizing more than 30 land ports of entry, supporting border security, and promoting trade and commerce. With this funding, we can also do our part to combat climate change. We can reduce greenhouse gas emissions in federal facilities by fully 95%. We can put more than 150,000 zero-emission vehicles on the road, along with charging infrastructure at our public buildings. And we can help the government lead by example and dramatically reduce its carbon footprint. We can also make long deferred and sorely needed investments in our digital infrastructure so that we can provide better, secure, accessible services to the public and our agency partners. Overall, these investments will allow GSA to make critical upgrades, the ones we need to ensure our government can effectively and efficiently deliver for the public now and be better prepared for the future. Whether you're a teacher, a construction worker, a small business owner, or a member of Congress, these are smart investments. I look forward to partnering with the committee in the years ahead, and I look forward to your questions today.
Thank you very much, Administrator. Now we'll go to Ms. Nina Albert, who is the Commissioner for the Public Building Services.
Good morning, Chairwoman Titus, Ranking Member Webster, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Nina Albert, and I'm the Commissioner of the Public Building Service, or PBS, representing more than 5,500 employees. I'm happy to join Administrator Carnahan this morning to discuss with you PBS's priorities. I come to GSA with experience in real estate and economic development, most recently serving as the Vice President of Real Estate and Parking at the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. I led WMATA's headquarters consolidation and accelerated transit-oriented development throughout the Washington region. I also served in the DC government, where I oversaw major waterfront revitalization projects and served as the Department of Environment's Chief of Green Economy, where I developed commercial property incentives for energy and water efficiency. I'm pleased to bring these and my other experiences to GSA. Since the start of the COVID pandemic, GSA has proudly supported agencies by keeping buildings open for mission support, providing enhanced facilities cleaning, and providing technology and other services to support remote work. As a result of greater rates of telework throughout the federal government, GSA desires to seize this opportunity to optimize the federal real estate footprint and is partnering with our customers in the executive and judiciary branches to understand how their space needs may change in the future. GSA is using what we're learning from these discussions to develop an integrated hybrid workplace that will likely combine human capital, technology, and real estate solutions. To get there, we need to capture space utilization data, design workspaces for enhanced mobility and collaboration, advance smart buildings, and support employee productivity and well-being. One of my primary focuses will also be to develop the strategies and plans for consolidating more agencies into federally owned facilities and reduce our dependence on leases. Already, since FY 2018, GSA has renegotiated more than 1,100 leases at below market rates, moved more than 200 leases into federally owned space, and avoided more than $4.5 billion in lease costs. The coming 5 years promise to achieve even greater space and cost savings, and reinvesting in federally owned facilities will be key to this strategy. Unfortunately, we are coming from behind, and too many federal buildings have fallen into a state of disrepair due to lack of consistent funding for maintenance. To gain the full benefit of building ownership and to be the best stewards of the American taxpayer dollar, we must address the growing list of deferred maintenance projects. By the way, replacing antiquated building systems with high-performance electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and envelope systems, as well as managing our buildings using real-time utilization data, we can significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, conserve water and energy use, and promote climate resilience. GSA's goal is to supply 100% of our electricity needs from renewable energy sources by 2025 and achieve carbon pollution-free electricity by 2035. Looking forward, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Build Back Better initiative will help America continue to make smart investments in federally owned facilities. Specifically, these two bills will help PBS complete nearly 100 projects across 34 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. The goal is to modernize and consolidate our footprint to make it more efficient and resilient, all the while creating good paying American jobs. In closing, I would ask that this subcommittee support and advocate for GSA's FY22 budget request, the bipartisan infrastructure deal, and the Build Back Better initiative. These programs will all enable GSA to make critical investments in building infrastructure and allow the federal government to better serve the American people. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our members' questions. Each member will be recognized for 5 minutes, and I'll start by recognizing Mr. DeFazio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 2025 figure that you just put out, Ms. Turner, could you just repeat that again? You expect to be, what'd you say, carbon neutral by 2025, and then sustainably supplied by 35? Was that it?
Our commitment is to source our power purchases from from 100% renewable energy sources by 2025. And then by 2035, get to carbon pollution-free electricity.
Okay. I'm trying to understand the difference between sustainable and carbon-free. Because
yeah, the difference is that buildings, so there's power purchasing, which powers buildings, but there's a whole variety of other fuel uses for a building, primarily to heat the building. And so most buildings run on natural gas or some other, mainly natural gas. And so to get to alleviate our reliance on natural gas, that's what will take us to 2035.
Okay, so I get you got over here. We're talking about lights, or in parts of the country where you might heat with electricity, that'll be sustainable. But other places where you're using natural gas or heating oil or whatever, those will be till 35. Okay, I get that. I hope you can meet those goals, and that'll be great. How do you know what the deferred maintenance backlog is on our, I mentioned already that apparently there's $10 billion in collected rent, which is difficult to access. Do you know what the deferred maintenance backlog is? Is it less than or more than $10 billion?
Well, of the collected rent that we receive, typically about half of that goes to pay for our lease obligations. So what's left from that, we collect approximately anywhere between 10 and $11 billion in rent from our federal agencies. About half of that goes to pay back lease obligations, which leaves approximately half to invest into our own facilities. We've been awarded over the past 10 years, rather than the 5 billion, closer to 3.5 to 4 billion. So that limitation the limitation on access to that remaining billion of dollars has resulted now in what we estimate to be close to $9.5 billion in deferred maintenance and liabilities.
Oh, this is interesting. This so much echoes the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, where we're collecting an ad valorem tax, depositing it in a fund, a program created by Ronald Reagan, and Congress underspent that money for years. We finally, last year, resolved that. It only took me 25 years. I hope it doesn't take us 25 years to access more sensibly your revenues and to keep up with your backlog, and would be very interested in specifics or ideas that the agency could provide. I guess I'm not quite certain what the barrier is. I mean, you're making requests that are just not met. Is that correct?
I'll jump in here for a second.
Sure.
Okay. So what we understand that there has been traditionally a spending cap that each of the appropriation subcommittees has to deal with, and they're able to do allocations within that subcommittee. And when those are limited, if it's a choice between spending money on, Head Start or childcare or building deferred maintenance, the choice has gone to investing in kids. So what we're asking for is that this be treated as it should, which is a separate fund that is used to maintain our buildings. As you alluded to, we have a lot of leases coming up in the next few years. This is an opportunity to consolidate into the more cost-effective federally owned space. That's only going to happen if the space is maintained well and agencies want to go there, and it's the type of space that meets their mission needs. So this is just a unique confluence of events where we have deferred maintenance, we have leases coming up, we have agencies rethinking how much space they need. This is a smart time to invest. And if we do this, we're able to save $2 billion a year of tax money in lower lease costs. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Sure. When do you expect, I mean, how many agencies have provided, their future projections for space needs post or, well, we're still in COVID, I guess, but looking ahead to post-COVID, have any agencies provided that data to you, or when would you expect to get some of that data so you can begin to make those future plans?
Yeah, Workforce 2030 is talking about this all the time with agencies across the government. I think Nina might have, if you want to address this more specifically, but these are ongoing conversations we're having with every agency. As you can imagine, all of them are rethinking how much telework is going to impact their space needs. This is not going to be something that's resolved in the next few weeks, but definitely something over the next year or so. Nina?
Absolutely.
Wrap this up. We're way over time.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I was going to let Nina finish. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, good. All right, Nina, you please proceed.
Well, thank you so much. We have been already engaging our customers. No one is prepared to make a hard line decision right now because many customers are waiting to get back into full reentry mode, see how employees are starting to use space and what the hybridized model looks like for their agency and for their people. But we're hearing back from people anywhere between 20% reductions all the way up to 50% reductions, which is in line with what GSA's own expectations are. So it'll depend agency by agency. And as Administrator Carnahan said, it's going to be an ongoing conversation. But we do believe that overall for the federal government, we will be able to reduce the footprint. And there is a great opportunity to reposition our existing portfolio and reduce our reliance on leases.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to the witnesses.
Thank you. And now I recognize Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So GSA has announced information on its implementation of the Biden administration's vaccine mandate. Can you describe the requirements for contractors and lessors of a public building side?
I'll speak generally to the vaccine mandate, and Commissioner Albert can, if you'd like to go into any further details. As you know, Congressman, we're working hard to ensure that the pandemic is under control, that folks are able to get safely back into their everyday lives and their work schedules, and higher vaccination rates. The higher they are, the faster we're going to get there. So every step we're taking is to move toward that goal. We are working closely with the contractors. The intent is not to punish anyone, but to make sure that folks get vaccinated as soon as they possibly can. We understand that many of the contractors are having to deal with unions and employees and educating folks. And so we're doing all we can to encourage them to make progress on this by the deadlines that are set.
Okay, and even the ones that rent the buildings, those two, you're doing the same thing there?
Right. This would apply to federal employees and to federal contractors.
Yeah. Do these requirements cover existing leases? If so, has there been any analysis on the impact of the mandate on leasing costs and competition?
They do apply to existing leases. I don't know about the second question. Nina, do you have anything you want to add on that?
I don't. Right now, we have received a fair number of contract modifications that have been approved, both by contractors as well as lease amendments approved by our lessors. We're not at the deadline yet for their response to the lease amendments. The concerns that have been raised to date have really just been around the deadlines and how tight they are. And so we're working with our contractors and lessors to make sure that they have the time that they need to implement these mandates. And candidly, we're working with lessors and contractors as they're sharing with us either their concerns around the deadlines or any other questions that they might have about the guidance that's been put out.
Could you commit to providing the committee staff with some sort of briefing on this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, certainly. Whatever be helpful for you, we are happy to visit with you about it.
Okay, I had another thought as I was asking that question is, I heard the word cleaning a lot in your two presentations about keeping the buildings clean. That's laudable, but on the other hand, since cleaning became an issue and now it's not as much because it's been determined after 60 years that the virus is an aerosol. It doesn't fall to the ground, even at a larger weight and so forth, or size. And so the real problem is in the air. I talked to the building engineer here at the Capitol, and then another one who replaced him, gave them some information. And then also I talked to the speaker and to the minority leader about the issue and about what they needed to do as far as aerosol versus things falling to the ground, which I believed over 2 years ago. But my question would be, are you in these new buildings making provision for some sort of air cleaning? I mean, there's ionizers, there's also UV lights. Are those being added to buildings that are under construction or being designed and so forth?
I'll
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
defer to the commissioner on this one.
Well, Congressman, thank you for that question. I don't want to overlook how important cleaning in the case when there is a COVID case or a suspected COVID case comes up. We are still poised to respond and make sure that the building tenants are notified and that we are adequately and appropriately cleaning where the suspected case is found in the building and disinfecting high-touch surfaces. So I just wanted to put that on the radar and let you know that that's still a high priority. As it pertains to what we're learning now about how the virus spreads, which is through airborne means, we have surveyed all of the buildings. As you know, we have a very large portfolio to understand what type of ventilation systems are in place, because one of the goals is to increase air ventilation in spaces. And then the other is air filtration. So many of our newest buildings already have the best or the recommended level of air filtration and options for ventilation. Where we're really focused, and CARES Act funding is going to allow us to implement this where we haven't, where we've already implemented some, but we're looking at implementing more, which is to retrofit those older buildings where applicable with appropriate ventilation mitigations as well as air filtration mitigations. So I'm hoping that that's answering your question. Like I said, the most modern buildings have what is recommended by the CDC for air filtration and ventilation. And where we're really focusing is dealing with retrofitting our older buildings.
Thank you. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Appreciate those detailed answers. But before we can very effectively move forward, we need to address the kind of 3 elephants in the room. The first is the old post office. Now we know that that's being leased again. We don't want to make the same mistakes we made before, but GSA hasn't really complied with the Inspector General's directive to review what the definition of emoluments clause. Now, most of our buildings aren't 100% leased. We just lease a little part of them, but we'd like to get that in place and wonder what your plans are for that moving forward. And what are the responsibilities left for the Trump organization if it is leased, and how will y'all be handling that new lease? Second one, the chairman mentioned the FBI building. Are they moving? Are they building? Are they staying? Kind of tell us what's happening there. And then third, what about that misguided decision to send the BLM out to Grand Rapids? Some are coming back, some are staying. How is that affecting your public buildings decisions kind of in the near term? I would ask the administrator, and then Ms. Albert can weigh in.
Thanks. I'll address a few of those, Congresswoman, and let Commissioner Albert respond to some of the others. With respect to the old post office, as we've talked about, I know that this is an important topic. I know that there's a lot of history about this that long predates my arrival 4 months ago at GSA. And I very much respect Congress's oversight role in all of this. I have instructed the team to ensure that the tenant is fully compliant with all of its lease obligations, and that we at GSA are being as transparent as we possibly can be with the committee and its oversight request. And always focused on doing everything we can to protect the public's interest in every way. So I cannot turn back the clock on things that have happened in the past, but I can commit that going forward, I am very interested in making sure we have the right procedures in place for these kind of out leases, and that Congress's role in that is one that is appropriate. So that's with respect to the old post office. On FBI, that again is a topic I know that is of great interest to the committee, and lots of members that I talk to bring up this topic. What I can tell you is that I've reached out to Director Ray, that our teams are working closely together to sort of better understand what their needs are in light of the changed circumstances of the last few years. And we'll welcome any kind of direction or input from Congress as we take this important project on. I get that this is a matter of great urgency, but we also have to make sure that we're responding to the needs of the FBI and what they're looking for going forward, and that's what we're working on. Commissioner, do you have anything you want to add on either of those or the BLM question?
I just wanted to make or ask a clarifying question. Chairwoman Titus, did you mean the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, or BLM?
Now, I thought it was BLM that moved some of its folks out to the west. And then they decided to move them back, and some are still left out there. Was it an old lease, a new lease, that sort of thing?
I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of details about that, but I will make sure to get information back to this committee so I can appropriately answer that question.
Okay, well, I would appreciate that. And it's Bureau of Land Management, not Labor Statistics.
Correct, right.
That would have been even a worse decision to move them to Grand Rapids. Grand Junction. I can't imagine why that would have happened. Well, before you leave, let me just ask you about the design of federal buildings. I mean, will you commit to working with me so that we can put those in place so that we don't go back to having every building follow the same pattern, but we can improve the program for allowing local input and consideration of the location of the building, whatever it may be that we decide to construct?
Yeah, certainly, Congresswoman. I'll take this, Commissioner. This is a topic I know is of great interest to you and the public. First, I just want to put out there that the president has revoked the previous administration's executive order on the topic that you raised. So I think that should address immediate concerns. Second, I couldn't agree more that the design of our public buildings should reflect the diversity of our communities and should fit into those communities. And it's part of our job is to ensure that that happens. So we're happy to work with you in whatever way you see appropriate to move that forward so that you can be confident that's happening going forward.
Well, thank you, Administrator. There's a bipartisan bill that I introduced, HR 5291, that would do this. So maybe it's called the Democracy and Design Act. If you take a look at that, I'd appreciate it. Give us any input so we can try to work to move that forward. That would be great.
Certainly will. Thanks, ma'am.
I now recognize Mr. Massey.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ms. Carnahan, can you tell us what the deadline is for the vaccine mandate from the Biden administration for federal employees?
So that I can tell you that there's a target date of December 8th that they have put out there, that they want there to be progress on vaccinations. So that is the hard and fast date that I know of.
What will happen to employees who refuse to take the vaccine by December 8th?
So we're talking about contractors here?
Just federal employees.
Okay. So if the federal employee date, I believe is different. That is sometime in November. I think it's the 22nd. So my understanding is that for those who choose not to be vaccinated, that's who you're speaking about. Yes. There are going to be steps that they can take for reasonable accommodation where that's appropriate.
So how many requests have you received for religious accommodations, given that the deadline is coming upon us, or medical accommodations or exemptions?
Yeah, I don't have that number, Congressman, but certainly I can check on that and see what it is. The deadline is several weeks away, so we can give you a rolling number, or we can give you the one at
right. How long do you think it will take you to process those requests for exemptions, given that the deadline is 3 weeks away?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that question, Congressman. I know that's a thing that's ongoing right now. And I can get back to you about that.
Okay. How many have been granted or requested? Do you know how many have been requested or granted at this point?
I do not.
Is there a form that federal employees at the GSA can fill out right now and apply for a religious exemption, or is that form not available yet?
So my understanding is that folks have been asked to say their vaccination status and provide, proof of their vaccination. That we've gotten a very high level number of responses to that. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I can get that to you very quickly.
Okay.
And that a large number of those have provided proof of vaccination. So I don't know what the number is. It is a relatively small number that we're going to be considering for religious and other kinds of health exemptions.
I hope you'll consider them all of the requests. Attorney General Garland testified to me last week in the Judiciary Committee that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act requires the consideration and granting of religious accommodations in the context of vaccine mandates. Have you received any guidance from the Biden administration on how to process these requests, given that the law requires that religious accommodations be made to the vaccine mandate?
Yeah, thanks, Congressman. The team is working very hard on this. This is a matter of great interest to everybody across the administration. I think it's important that there be as much consistency as possible so that there's predictability in it. So yes, the team is working closely with the rest of the administration on this.
Can you provide us with the guidance that you've been given from the Biden administration? And I'm not picking on the GSA, you just happen to be in this committee today. This is a question that I asked the DOJ and other departments.
Yeah, whatever we can provide, we will provide. So I'll ask the team about that and to circle back with you and your staff.
But I'm trying to determine what kind of guidance has been given. Ms. Albert, have you received any guidance or communication from the Biden administration regarding the possible implementation of vaccine passports or other proof of vaccination to enter federal facilities or for contractors or the general public?
Well, as you probably are aware, GSA co-chairs and is part of the Safer Federal Workforce Task Force, which is a multi-agency group working on the vaccination mandate as well as others. And so making sure that the communications from the federal government to our contractors is clear. Please, we are obviously receiving feedback from contractors and questions, and we're processing those very quickly and continuing to evolve our guidance as we learn more.
Have there been any discussion of vaccine passports or requiring proof of vaccination to enter federal buildings?
I have not heard anything about vaccine passports. In order to enter into a federal building, right now, you need to, and this is the current state of what the guidance says, is be able to provide either you have to wear a mask if the locality requires mask wearing indoors, so compliance with local guidance around mask wearing, social distancing, of course, and then just a provision or an attestation about vaccination status.
Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chairwoman. My time's expired. I'll yield back.
All right, thank you, Mr. Massey. We'll now go to Ms. Holmes Norton.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for this important hearing. I have a question for Administrator Carnahan. We've had a running drama with the SEC building here in the nation's capital. On September 30th, the GSA entered into a lease on the SEC's behalf for a new SEC headquarters building. I am pleased that GSA has prioritized cost effectiveness in this procurement process. the SEC has wasted hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars on leasing errors, including overestimating the amount of space needed for its headquarters by 300% at a cost of $500 million. More recently, in 2019, the SEC effectively vetoed the GSA's entire procurement process, allowing a multi-million-dollar procurement funded by taxpayers simply to go to waste. I introduced the Securities and Exchange Commission Real Estate Leasing Authority Revocation Act. That's HR 1468 to revoke the SEC's authority to independently lease general purpose office space and instead to provide for the GSA to lease such space for the SEC. I'm asking you, what is the administration's view of this bill?
Well, thanks for the question, Congresswoman. I'm not familiar or have a position on the bill specifically. I can address generally the situation at the SEC.
Please do.
As you know, the facility that was delivered to the SEC was based on the needs and requirements that they laid out and that Congress approved. So that's what was done. That's the work GSA did. You probably also are well aware that there has been a protest of the award by one of the losing bidders, which limits what I can go into in terms of the specifics. The broader question that you raise, which is one about agencies and how much space they're going to need in the future, as we've been talking about, all of the agencies in this post-COVID environment are looking to what their space needs are going to be. And GSA is very focused on how we can consolidate and be good stewards of tax money by consolidating agencies into existing space. So that just know that that's what we're thinking about all the time when it comes to these projects.
So you don't think that an agency should have independent authority to go out and lease whatever building it feels like leasing?
Well, I know different agencies have different authorities, and Nina, I don't know if you can speak to any of that, but that is an issue that is better addressed by Congress than by GSA.
To speak to and reaffirm what the administrator just said, I mean, obviously GSA has authority to lease space. Some other agencies also have such authorities. In certain cases, we're able to delegate our authority to others, and we evaluate whether or not that's appropriate, as well as are a partner with that delegated agency when they do receive authority from us to ensure that the leases that they enter into have oversight and have the benefit of GSA's expertise. In all cases, when we're going through these consolidation opportunities or headquarters moves, GSA is in partnership with the organization and the agency that's looking to move. We're the ones with the authority and the real estate expertise to help them conceive and design their new space, but ultimately they are the end user, and they're a very, very important part of the discussion and the conception of what their needs are.
But I wanted to establish that agencies can't independently go out and lease by themselves. Final question to Commissioner Albert. What steps, if any, has GSA taken to jumpstart the Southwest Eco District, including selling the Department of Energy's Forrestal building?
Well, this is a personal area of interest of mine, being from Washington, D.C. It's a great opportunity. I will look into that and have been interested in that. I don't have specific plans to share at this moment, but that is something that I would really look forward to working with you on.
Madam Chair, I'd like to get the answer on that question.
We'll be sure to follow up with Ms. Albert. Thank you. Now I recognize Ms. Van Dyne for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Administrator Carnahan, thank you for testifying today. As you know, outside of the DC region, the largest cluster of federally owned and operated real estate is the 47 land ports of entry along the southern border with Mexico. The vast majority of these ports are owned or leased by the GSA or with CBP involvement and are in dire need of modernization. These ports have a real impact on economic activity in border states. And each day, thousands of Americans and Mexicans pass legally through the checkpoints to work, shop, or go to school. President Biden is finally allowing non-essential travel to resume between the U.S. and Mexico.
More than $500 billion, and that's with the T.
I'm not sure whose mic is on.
Yes,
But,
Ms. Norton, I think your mic is on.
So you have
Thank
been
you.
in office since July. Have you visited the southern border yet?
No, ma'am, I have not yet visited the southern border. I did visit a land port of entry in Vermont a month ago.
So
and
yeah, that's definitely not on the southern border, and Texas is not as much interested in Vermont as we are about the ports along the Texas-Mexican border. So will you commit to visiting the ports of entry along the Texas-Mexican border soon?
I'm very interested in getting to the southern border. I will tell you, I haven't been traveling that much in light of COVID, but am very interested in getting out to all the places that we
Well, I
serve.
would hope, yeah, I would hope that this would be a priority, especially with all that's going on at our southern border, getting down there and seeing for yourself what needs to happen. As we face critical supply chain crisis combined with historic levels of illegal immigration, what's the impact of allowing land port of entries to deteriorate?
Well, as you have already pointed out, these land ports of entry have all kinds of maintenance needs. It's about having security at our borders, but also about having openness for business and other kinds of transport. And so this is the first entryway into the United States. We ought to be making those ones that are welcoming, secure, and appropriate for the services they provide.
So again, I would ask that you commit to actually going down there and visiting it firsthand. Last month, you made comments on reimagining how people work and make sure that federal government employees have everything they need to work, whether they're remote in the office or using a hybrid model. Unfortunately, what my constituents and I have seen is a non-responsive federal workforce. Wait times are out of control, and it's clear that agencies such as the IRS, Social Security, USCIS are not being effective while working remotely. So have you had conversations with agencies to see what's needed to get agencies back up and running so that the government can be responsible for its constituents?
Yeah, thanks for that question. This is a topic of great interest to me, is how government can work better for the people it serves and save money doing it. We've seen certainly through the pandemic over and over again, the failure of government websites to be able to deliver for people at a really urgent time of need. And so while GSA is not in charge of every government website, we do have the ability to help support agencies with what are called shared services. And that, what I mean by that are things that every interaction with government has to have, right? So there are login services, for example, that need to be secure. There are identity verification services that every
my question,
agency would need.
and I'm sorry, but I have a very limited time. My question had to do with making sure that we're having our employees get back to work in their offices. So have you had conversations with those agencies that I mentioned, specifically the ones that are not working well remotely? Have you had conversations with them to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to get those employees back into the office?
So GSA has had people in offices across the country throughout the pandemic. We will continue to do that. We're ready to serve and stand up with any other of our agency partners who want to have their people come back to work. We are interested in supporting that, but we don't make the decision ultimately about when they're returning to their offices.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. One final quick question on I understand the GSA announced that there's a new diversity initiative, and the press statement announcing the initiative, GSA said that when we make policy, build buildings, buy supplies, and deploy technology, we'll keep diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility at the top of the list. The mission of the GSA is to provide federal agencies with buildings, buildings, lease office space, services, supplies, things like that. So does the DEIA, which is what I just read, as President Biden defines it, trump GSA's main mission of providing office government services?
Look, GSA's mission, as I said from the outset, is to make government work better for the people it serves and to save money doing it. That is going to continue to be our mission. That may change over time how we deliver on that mission, and ensuring that we give access to everyone, and it is an appropriate thing for government to do. So we'll be focused on that as well as looking out for taxpayer money.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yield.
Thank you. I might just remind Ms. Van Dyne, since she's interested in the difficulties at the land ports of entry, there's $3.4 billion in the Senate transportation bill. She might want to use some of that money for helping with those ports. And since the IRS is a concern, not being able to help the people of this country, there's $2 billion for taxpayer services and the reconciliation bill. So she might.
I appreciate that, but we all know throwing money at something.
Thank you. We'll now recognize Ms. Davids.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you, Administrator Carnahan and Commissioner Albert, for taking the time to testify here today. I represent the Kansas 3rd, which is in the Kansas City metro area, and is an area that has absolutely been impacted by some of the increasing severe effects of climate change and severe weather events. I'm curious about the ways that GSA has taken a look at building codes and reviewing building codes, and the ways that can not only help us better prepare for severe weather events, but also to actually make a dent in some of the climate change impacts that we're having. I'm very curious about what, if you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and either of you can speak to that.
Let me just say a few things at the outset and then defer to Commissioner Albert on this. Look, the impacts of climate change are real. They're ones that present a risk to our portfolio, and we're spending time thinking about that, both the existing portfolio and what we need to do and what the major risks are and how we can mitigate those. But we're also thinking about how these changes should impact how we think about locating future government facilities. So that's really, about doing better with data, understanding all of our portfolio and doing the evaluations to figure out certainly things in flood zones or other kinds of climate risks to our systems, and then putting a price tag on what it would cost to do that mitigation. So, Commissioner, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I'd just like to respond to the specific question about building codes. As you know, building codes are set, and which codes are used are set by the locality. We comply with all local codes. But in terms of what the federal government's own standards are, as the GSA sets them, we really incorporate into our design specifications and lease guidelines what codes are required for federal buildings or for the federal government to lease space from other landlords. And so that's really how we set the standard for things like building resilience. It's really in how buildings are designed and the design standard that we bring it to, which in many cases is above what local codes mandate.
Yeah, and I think in all the research that I've seen, if we really took a strong hard look at improving building codes, we could actually really make a dent on things like carbon emissions and that sort of thing. So I appreciate the work you guys are doing over there to address that. And then I think, since I just have like a short amount of time here, but I do think that piggybacking off of the previous questions that we had, I know there's the Federal Buildings Personnel Training Act of 2010, which actually, coincidentally enough, was brought up by Congressman Russ Carnahan, our administrator's brother. You know, the federal workforce is, of course, becoming more complex. The buildings, the systems, they're becoming more sophisticated, and the technology is progressing at a very quick pace. I know that you all are working on smart buildings and trying to make sure that our smart employees are trained up in the way that they need to be. If you want to take this last minute or so to kind of talk about where you're at on implementing that plan and piece of legislation.
That's great. Thanks for the question. You're right. Smart buildings and technologies they're just wise investments. They improve health, they improve energy efficiency, they save us money. And so it's all good, but it does require training facility managers to be able to do all of those things. We've identified a couple of courses, one in the cybersecurity area, which is particularly relevant for any kind of smart buildings, as well as public health. And so we're doing trainings, but look, and we're working with agency partners, including the State Department and the Corps of Engineers on doing this as well. It's consistent. One of the consistent things we hear, frankly, from our partners is that, training is really useful, but when push comes to shove, training budgets are often things that get cut. So just know that's something that is a challenge, but something we think is a worthy investment. Nina, do you have anything you want to add on that?
I'll just add that smart buildings is part of the ecosystem of sustainable building design, and that is absolutely the direction that GSA is going in. We are really focused on upskilling our workforce. We have the fortunate position of not only having the green proving ground, which can test certain types of smart building technologies, but we're also putting into place and have evaluated what specific skills we need to concentrate on to upskill our workforce to be able to respond to, manage, as well as analyze data that we're getting back as a result of the smart building system. So this is an area of focus. As we further green our buildings, make them more sustainable, this is a crucial aspect of being able to manage smart buildings, high performance buildings into the future. And so we're not taking our eye off of this ball.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you. And thank you, Chairwoman. I yield back.
Thank you. Maybe you'll keep us updated as you move to more and more smart buildings. Thank you. We now go to Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've got a couple of questions for Ms. Carnahan. Do you have have you started a process to begin the consolidation of federal properties in order to reduce the amount of money that we spent as a federal government on all of our agencies? Have we started a process on that?
Well, we think about it all the time, Congressman. It is leases come up on different cadences. That's why, as I mentioned before, the fact that we've got about over 40% of our leases coming up in the next 4 years. That is the moment we should be investing in our owned property so that the transitions can be easily made by agencies out of that leased space and into owned space. It will save $2 billion a year in lease payments, which to me is a very smart investment and payback for the American people.
I probably think you'd probably save a heck of a lot more. Do you find in the federal government that agencies seem to silo themselves, that they consider themselves somewhat like independent of the federal government? Not really, but do they really think of themselves kind of as independent?
Well, look, I think that a lot of what drives agencies' decision-making when it comes to space is financial incentives, right? And one of the challenges that we see over and over again is because agencies are not able to have the proceeds of the money if they dispose of something, right? And they have to then come to get extra money to build out new space. There's just not a lot of incentive for them to make that change because the budget process is set up in a way that sort of it encourages the status quo. So I'd be really interested in working with you and the committee on ways to create smart incentives to encourage these agencies to consolidate. And that means giving them the funds to do the build outs to make that happen.
I doubt that's going to work. I was the mayor of Miami-Dade County, and I always was a department director. I know that when I was a department director, I wanted to get bigger. All right. And that I felt as my agency was the most important agency in the agency that I was working for, the city of Miami at the time when I was a director. And so when I became the mayor, I said, no, we're going to centralize this thing, and we're going to make smart decisions based on what the greater good of the county is, not the agency. Although, and they're not mutually exclusive. Have you talked to the president or somebody in charge and said, look, we need to do some kind of executive order that kind of forces the agencies to work with GSA in order to start to consolidate a lot of these properties and to have a more holistic strategy of what we need, and it's what you need, it's not what you want. Okay. And so I know that the agencies would, if you ask them what they want, they will ask for 3 times the number of square feet that they actually need, et cetera, et cetera. And so, have you thought about asking the president to issue some kind of an order that says, look, we need to start consolidating and save some real dollars here?
So I have, Congressman, been talking to everyone I can talk to. I have not spoken to the president about this topic directly, but I have spoken to lots of people about the need to be able to take this unique moment where agencies are rethinking what their space needs are because they've just spent 20 months with people teleworking, and they know that this is going to change going forward. So there's not a lot of times in government, certainly, that there is a seismic shift in how people are thinking about how they deliver service. And we're at that moment. So the question is whether we're going to be smart and take advantage of it. The way we do that is we create incentives for people to move into shared space. The only way that happens is if we invest in that.
Sorry to interrupt you, but the only person that they all work for is the president. Okay. So that is the one person that everybody, that's the head, that's the top of the pyramid here. And so the president is the ones who have to issue the order to do that, to get it moving along. Incentives may work or they may not work. It's actually going to take some action and orders from the president to say, this is what we're going to do as a country. This is the way that we're moving forward. Also, the other thing that I want to talk about is I know the federal government has extensive properties all over the place. Some are being used, some are not. And the ones that are not being used are not productive. They're actually costing us money to maintain. Do you have a plan to put forward so that we can start to release some of this unused, unnecessary federal lands and make them productive instead of being an expense on the federal government?
Yeah, it's a great question. I share your urgency about this. There is no reason why it should take such a long time to dispose of properties that folks have decided they don't need to use anymore. But it is a longer process than I like. In my home state in Missouri, I've learned about one in St. Louis that's taken many, many years, and everybody knows it needs to be disposed of, but it still hasn't been. There are often issues with getting that done. Sometimes those are environmental issues. Sometimes those are other kind of community issues. The main thing we've got to sort of balance against speed is the impact on the community, because you can imagine if you're giving up a big federal tenant in a space, that's going to have an impact on a community. And so we don't want to make those decisions lightly, and we want to be in close consultation with the communities where they're located.
Thank you, ma'am. My time is up and I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Gonzalez Colon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Administrator, for being with us today. My question will be, given the significant seismic activity impacting the island of Puerto Rico, how confident are you that the digital federal building remains structurally sound, and what efforts the GSA is taking while working toward the needed seismic reinforcement to ensure my constituents that the facility is safe for occupancy?
Well, thanks for the question, Congresswoman. I know that this is a topic of great concern to you and your constituents. I know I've been only marginally briefed on this topic, but I believe Commissioner Albert can speak more specifically to that building.
Thank you so much. This is a priority for us. We've already obligated $48 million in repairs and improvements to facilities in Puerto Rico following Hurricanes Irma and Maria. We're also continuing our work in various campuses that are ongoing right now. So we're very pleased with the progress that we've made in the Build Back Better proposal. We believe that we can use about $500+ million to complete the projects of the federal facilities that are in Puerto Rico. And in that design and construction work, seismic protections, as well as other protections for other climate change events are being incorporated. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Commissioner, as well, and Administrator. And the reason I make this question is that you already know that last week this committee passed a resolution for the $22 million for the phase of design and the construction of the new annex to the building, and I'm happy with that. But I know as well that this is just the first phase of a long project. And when do you think my constituents can see the whole project being built? I mean, I know that the different phases are going up to this phase is 2022 to 2024, and the construction for seismic retrofit is back in 2028 to the fiscal year 2031. So do you say that this is, I mean, how committed is the administration in terms of having the funds for all the phases in the future?
This is part of, I mean, these projects will be part of the Build Back Better program for us. So if that funding is approved, then we are well positioned and do have these projects in our priority list for completion. As you know, the $22 million that kicks off the design, we are absolutely prepared to execute on that as soon as the FY22 budget is approved. And that is really what gets the entire process moving. And we're anxious to get started and to be able to deliver those projects for you.
Thank you. And my question, Administrator, right now will be, how will GSA use the lessons learned throughout the 2010 ARA project in San Juan to ensure high level of management, coordination, and oversight to be provided to ensure that the successful completion of this complex project can be done? We got a lot of experience with that project in the past, and I just want to know if the GSA is taking into account all the mistakes and situations that happened during that process in 2010.
So I appreciate your question. As you know, I was not around in 2010, so not familiar with all of the history, certainly not as much as you are. But I will say that our teams are committed to doing all they can to deliver these things on time, on budget, and meeting the mission needs of the team. That takes a lot of close collaboration with people that are on the ground, certainly with people in your office. And so we'll look forward to collaborating going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Frater. And my last question will be that just to let you know that Puerto Rico has an agency dedicated to the promotion and use of public-private partnerships to the benefit of the government and to save taxpayers' money for my constituents. And I think it will be beneficial for GSA to have the ability to use P3 partnerships. My question to you is, do you believe in P3 projects? And if you are committed to work with my office and this committee to come up with solutions to ensure GSAs can utilize P3 partnerships in the future?
Yeah, thanks. I'm a big fan of public-private partnerships. In fact, whenever we can do anything that is a smart, quicker way to speed up projects and also save money, it makes sense. But what we need to make sure of is that those are set up in ways that do make sense and don't mean the government is overpaying for something. So they need to be financially appropriate and looking out for taxpayers. One of the things that we have done a lot of when it comes to P3s is energy savings performance contracts. So that's one where we have a lot of experience, where, as you know, that's where we enter into long-term contracts with companies that upgrade and improve the energy efficiency of facilities, and then they're paid back sort of over time as we pay for those utility costs. There are there are plenty of ways we could expand those. We would really look forward to working with you on how to do that.
Thank you, Administrator. My time is expired, but I want to say thank you for coming today, and I invite you to come to the island whenever you're ready. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll now recognize Mr. Guest for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Commissioner Albert, I want to speak with you a few minutes on a flexible co-working space. We know prior to the pandemic that the GSA was reducing our real estate footprint because of excess capacity. We know because of COVID, we've seen more individuals now teleworking, and that's created uncertainty about the amount of space that we need going forward in the future. I know several weeks ago, there was a news release reported in the by the Federal News Network, and it says the General Services Administration's building on lessons in flexible workplace learned during the COVID-19 pandemic is giving the federal workforce new opportunities to keep working outside of their traditional offices. It goes on to say GSA last week took the first major step in implementing its long-term future of work strategy by awarding a first of its kind contract to provide flexible co-working spaces for federal employees nationwide. The contracts, whose GSA estimates to be roughly $50 million, harkens back to a similar concept the agency experimented with more than a decade ago. And so two things. First, I ask if you could kind of expand upon the flexible co-working spaces, how you see that going forward as we are looking to retool coming out of COVID-19. And then also, when can we expect to see task orders issued for competition under this contract?
Well, thank you so much for that question, Congressman Guest. We've actually just last week hosted an event virtual with I think it was 40 different agency customers that were really interested in learning more about the co-working task or IDIQ. So we answered questions about the contract and what it allows them to do. This is the first of its kind contract that the federal government has done. Why we decided to offer it was just to give more opportunity and more options for agencies. And it's particularly well suited to address short-term space needs. When you're entering into a longer term or a larger size lease, there's a process affiliated with that. And the flexible co-working contract allows us to offer space as a service. So it's a little bit more off the shelf. If an agency needs space for a month or up to a year, they can go ahead and get access to this space. And there's a whole variety of different spaces that most of these landlords or service providers offer, from conference room space to individual offices and everything in between. So it's been met with a lot of interest. We believe it gives us additional flexibility and broadens the services that we're able to provide to customers. Ultimately, we'll see, just like we're doing, this is the great experiment, candidly, for both the private sector and the public sector. Everyone understands that the future of work will be more designed with flexibility and mobility in mind, where different people are going to need different spaces, but what they value when they come to an office is collaboration and other kinds of spaces. So we are going to have to evolve our own spaces, and having access to co-working space allows agencies to decide what kinds of spaces they think they need without the federal government making an upfront capital investment in delivering that kind of space. So we can use this as an opportunity for agencies to come back to us, say, hey, I've been using a lot of this kind of space over that kind of space, and that's what I want in the future. So we see a great advantage to it. There's a lot of interest from our agencies, and we look forward in the next year to learning more about how the space is going to be used.
Thank you. And kind of an unrelated question, Commissioner, while I've got you, is on page 7 of the written testimony, it talks about the proposed $5 billion investment in federal buildings. Going on over to page 8, it talks about some of the potential savings. And then it says we can leverage these funds to buy low carbon materials as we work to modernize our existing facilities. And just curious, as it relates to low carbon materials, what type of materials would you be referring to there?
Well, there's a variety, but the most common example is really embedded carbon in concrete. And so, we would be working with concrete manufacturers, for example, and doing direct outreach with industry and industry groups to understand where they see the opportunity. Carbon is also embedded in the production of a lot of different types of materials, steel among them, equipment, others. I mean, this is going to be a long-term partnership with industry and equipment manufacturers, as well as material manufacturers, to figure out how we are going to reduce carbon in the production of these materials.
And I know my time's up, but would mass timber products also be included in something that you'd be looking at as far as a lower carbon material?
That is absolutely an option. Yes, there's nothing that we have that precludes the use of that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm out of time, so I yield back.
Thank you. Well, that concludes the members we have for questions. Mr. Webster, do you have any closing comments before we adjourn?
No, I just want to follow up on some of the things I was talking about, but I'm going to do that in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. And then thank you, Administrator and Commissioner. We really appreciate your commitment to transparency and cooperation. You can tell by the questions that there's a lot of interest from the members on what you're doing and what you're planning to do. I also appreciate your working with us with the appropriators to get some of the money that you collect that you need to then reinvest in our buildings to make them safer, make them healthier, make them greener. So we want to work with you to do that. You set the market in many places where you're located for commercial real estate. So we want you doing it the most efficiently way possible, always keeping the taxpayer in mind, but not building to look like the Parthenon. So thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll appreciate you getting back with some of those questions. And I know that we'll be in touch moving forward. We welcome your wise counsel on these issues. So that concludes our hearing. Your comments will go into the record. As I said, they've been very helpful. I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing. I also ask unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for any additional comments and information submitted by members or the witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. The subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you.